Hey everybody, I'm Brad Dins. As Jen's mentioned, we have a lot of content to cover, so in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this introduction pretty brief. I'm sure most of you in this room are familiar with the open source extension Salesforce Inspector. If you used it for any bit of time, you probably noticed that development stalled on it a little while back. So in 2021, Thomas Prouveau decided to create a fork of Inspector to address some of those needs and add some new features that he would like. After using it personally for a few years, he actually decided to take that work public, and in March of 2024, he launched Salesforce Inspector Reloaded. Since then, he, along with a team of contributors, has been steadily adding to its feature set, creating what I feel is one of the best open source admin tools today. So with that, I'm going to share out my screen and we're going to get right into it. As I said, we have a lot of content to cover, so as Jen noted, please hold your questions to the end, and we'll leave a bit of time then for Q&A. So with that, let's have some fun. All right, so first things I want to talk about, let's see, how do you get to Salesforce Inspector? So there's actually two ways that you can do it. You can either click the pop-out tab here, or if you're a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, which I am, you can also click Alt-I. And then the other cool thing I want to show you about keyboard shortcuts is that Alt key also works. Do you see all these buttons and tabs with the letter underlined? If you hit the Alt key and then those buttons, or the letter under those buttons, it is going to take you to that feature. Next thing I want to talk about is so we're actually going to work our way from the bottom up. So first thing I want to talk about is documentation. If you want to quickly get to documentation, you're going to go to this little eye icon here. And that immediately takes you to the Salesforce Inspector Reloaded page, and there is so much information here. First thing I really want to draw your attention to is this security and privacy section. So this talks about the open source nature of Salesforce Inspector. It talks about how you can inspect the source code. But one thing I want to talk about is it talks about the access token that is used for this. So we're going to get back to that, but I just want to bring your attention to that word access token. Next thing I want to talk about is installation. So we have it for Chromium browsers, Firefox, and Edge. And then there's also a beta version. So if you want to try like the bleeding edge of Salesforce Inspector, you will install the beta version. Now that is actually only available for Chromium only. Moving along, this how-to section. So most of the things that you would ever want to do in Salesforce Inspector, most of the things you'd have a question about are going to be in here. When I started building this presentation, I thought I knew about 70% of Inspector. In the past 2 weeks, I've doubled my knowledge, and I still feel like I know about 70% of Salesforce Inspector. So, and most of that was found from this page and also from this release notes page. Definitely spend some time in this release notes section. There is just so many cool little things that they have added to Salesforce Inspector that you are going to find in here. Let's see, moving on from that, let me get back to Salesforce Inspector. I apologize, I'm going so fast, but there's just so much to cover. Let's get to my back end. And now I want to talk, well, we did talk about the release notes section a little bit, but I want to, this is perfect that this comes up now. So this generate new token thing, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but you're going to see this come up every once in a while. When this does come up for you, just click generate new token, give it a moment, and then click allow. And now you have created a new token for Salesforce Inspector. So I'm going to go back to Salesforce Inspector. Give me one moment. This is, and let's see. So perfect. We got through that part right away. I was hoping that that would come up with the access token. Moving on, if you see these numbers down here, V1.24, that is the version of Salesforce Inspector that you are on. And then this 61 is actually the API version you're on. So why is that? And you can actually change this. And that might be important if you're in the middle of a release window, because this won't change until all of your production orgs are on the newest release. So if you want to get to the newest version of the API, you can alter it from here. Moving on from that, let's go to the options section. Now, there are two ways to get to that. You can either get to that from the gear, or you can get to that from options. They're both going to take you to the same place. So this is how Salesforce Inspector comes when you first install it. This generate access token button is the only one on. You do want to leave that on. Now, you can actually use that access token for controlling access to Salesforce Inspector. I'm not going to get into that, but I do want to just mention that. But next thing I want to mention, so if you want to change the position of this tab, you can change that orientation and position by this. Flow scrollability I like to turn on because this actually puts a scroll up and down window in your flow, or a scroll up and down bar in your flow, so you don't just have to use the hand to move around. Inspect table, or inspect page, show table borders. We're going to see what that looks like in a second, but if you're like me and in Excel, you always want to have your borders so you can look at the lines of data, you're going to want to turn that on. Next thing is always open links in new tabs. I love having this on because I like to have my old tab open so I can refer back for information. Now, granted, this does cause you to have a whole bunch of tabs open sometimes. So you do want to remember your Control W or Command W if you're a Mac user for closing out tabs. Next one I like to turn on is search metadata from shortcut tabs. I will get to that in a little bit, but this is very convenient. And then this one I really want to show, custom favicon org specific. So if you're like me, you like to be aware when you're working in prod. So what you can actually do is you can set a color for your org. So I put red in here. Now you can put any HTML color name, or you can put like the hex code. Let me refresh that. And before I do, I want you to pay attention to my favicon up here. So you can see right now it's blue. I'm going to refresh that. And now we can see that this favicon is red. So what I usually like to do is I like to have my prod be red because it's hot data, my blue be cold because it's not, it's not fresh data. Well, it is fresh data, but it's not hot data. And then I like to have my dev org be green because it's kind of like a green field implementation. You can do whatever you like there. I really love this custom favicon coloring. Moving on, API. Once again, you can set the API version here. The rest of this I'm not super familiar with. You might know a little bit more about that. Moving on to the next one, data export. I usually leave everything in here as is. One thing I do want to call out is the show delete records button. Now, we've all heard with great power comes great responsibility. And if you don't want the responsibility for accidentally deleting a record, you would turn this off. I do actually leave it on because I do use it, but I just want to call that out for you. Other thing I do want to call out here is this query templates section. Now, this is where you can actually build templates for SOQL and SOSL queries. That's pretty cool, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I actually don't use this because you can save your queries and you can also see a history of your queries. Moving on from there is data import. This is the batch size and thread size for the entire org. I generally don't change this because I change this when I am actually doing an import and I need to maybe throttle down those sizes. Otherwise, I just leave it as is. Last thing I want to talk about here is enable logs. So this is something I believe is relatively newer to Salesforce Inspector. And what this is you can actually set your log level and your log time for a login as. So say I want to log in as a user and I want to actually debug what they did. I can set that level and time here. So we're actually going to look at that in a bit, but we need to keep moving on. So let's see where I'm at in my notes. Cool. All right. So next thing I want to talk about. So let's see. We've talked about options. Where do I want to go from here? Middle options. So I actually call this like the middle options, but next thing I want to talk about is the setup home button. So this button will take you to the other side of Salesforce. So I often consider this like the front end of Salesforce. If I click this, it takes me to the back end of Salesforce. And if I do it again, while I'm on the back end of Salesforce, I click that and it takes me to the front end. So that's what that button does. I'm just going to use Control W to close out some tabs, but I do actually want to be on the back end. So let me keep going from here and open Salesforce Inspector with Alt-I. The next things, we talked about generate access tokens, so I don't need to do that here. The next three are going to be kind of developer specific, and these are things that you used to traditionally find in Workbench. So now you're starting to see them in Salesforce Inspector. Let's talk about REST Explorer. So here you can actually make REST calls. This is maybe a little bit more, a developer is going to be able to explain this a little bit better for you. But this is something that is new to Salesforce Inspector, and I'd like to mention that it also has templates in it and history of your calls, and you can save your calls. Now, we're going to actually look at this interface a little bit more when we get to Data Explorer, but I did just want to call this out for the developers in the room. Same with Explore API. This used to be something more like you would see in Workbench. If you want to explore the API, this is the way to do it. Last one is download metadata. So traditionally, this is probably something you're going to see a little bit more like pulling in VS Code, but say that you want to pull your metadata down for like offline backup or just to look at it in a text editor or something. this is the way that you would go about doing that. One thing I would say is don't try pulling all of this down at one time, especially if you're in big orgs. It will go slowly. It might actually freeze up. Last thing I want to talk about in this middle section is this org limit section. So this is kind of a bird's eye view of your org and just where you're at with everything. So you can see that I'm at 40% of my file storage. With this being a dev org, I only get 45 MB, so that's not crazy. I'm sorry, at data storage, I'm at 5% on file storage. And if you look down here, I'm at 100% on private connect outbound call out hourly. But if you look, I only have 0 entitlements for that. So that's why I'm showing at 100%. But this is just a quick place to go to see where you're sitting with everything. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move up to the top of the Salesforce Inspector Reloaded window. So now I'm going to click on org, and this is going to give you a bunch of information on your org ID, instance, type, status, and so on. Now, one thing I want to note, like whenever you see a link in Salesforce Inspector, click on it because it's going to take you somewhere cool. So I'm going to click on org ID. And this is actually going to take me to the company information from my website. Now, most of this information was on that org tab, but you can see where you're at with licenses. You can see where you're at with entitlements. It's just really cool to be able to quickly get there. The two other links on here, instance and maintenance, are actually going to take you to the same page, but different spots. So I'm just going to click on that. Instance is actually going to take us to the trust status for our instance, so we can see what that looks like. And then just see how our org is looking. And then same maintenance is going to take you to this link. So you can see the maintenance that's been done on your instance recently. So let's see, we've talked about org there. Next thing I want to talk about is shortcuts. Shortcuts. I always used to wonder, like, what in the heck is this about? Like, I can't see anything here. There's nothing found. Now, apparently you can actually add shortcuts to this, which you would find in that how-to article. I haven't went about and did that, but what I would like to actually show is just how powerful this is. So let's say like I'm looking for Apex classes. I can just start to type Apex and immediately it's going to take me there. One trick I want to show about this, and I don't know if this is going to be useful for anyone else, is say you have something that has a lot of things that start with it, like process builder. We're not going to see this a lot anymore, but if you type process, you see all kinds of things, and you finally need to get to the BU to get to process builder. If you just take a slice of your query, so SSBU, that's immediately going to show you just the things that have SSBU in it. I just find that a quick trick for finding things faster. You might feel differently. Some other things I do want to call out. So this isn't just like a link that you could same find on the left side. You can go much deeper. So I have some permission sets I want to look at, and I know what they're called. So they're called best permission set ever. So if I type that right, give me just 1 second, we can see that I've actually pulled up those two permission sets. So best permission set ever, and then second best permission set ever. And we can see those are permission sets. And we can also see that I found a permission set group named best permission set group ever. Now, one thing I want to call out, if you look at where this is highlighted, that is in the label. But you can also, because we set it in options, you can also query in the metadata. So you can see the metadata at the bottom, like sales underscore best underscore. So let's look for that. So sales underscore. Ooh. And of course, live demo, this isn't going to work. Give me just 1 second here. Best permission set ever. All right, so we do actually see that it is pulling in. Now we're looking at the metadata at the bottom. So can look both at label and a metadata names. One other thing I want to show about this while we're in it, there's a certain flow I want to talk about. It's my Halloween flow, or one of them. Let's see, we're actually going to look at this one because we're going to debug this just real quick. So when you go in here, all this flow does is if you on the account click invited to Halloween party, it's going to get all related contacts and invite them to the Halloween party on their contact record. So I just want to show this bar at the side. That is the flow scrollability bar that we get from Salesforce Inspector. Otherwise, you do all your movement with the hand. Another thing I do want to show, so we are in a flow right now. Let me click the Salesforce Inspector window. Now, we haven't got to this objects tab yet, but we see that we have some information in here about the object. So what we can kind of tell from that is that Salesforce Inspector is context specific. I might be phrasing that wrongly, but let's just click on this to take us to flow versions. So now from this, there's only one flow version in here, so not all that interesting. But what I want to point out to you here, you can actually see I have two Salesforce Inspector tabs. I have this one up top, and then I have this one that is in the flow window. So when I click the one up top, we don't actually get any data loaded in the Objects tab. But when I click in the inner one, now it does load information about that flow. So we get the flow ID, we get a bunch more information. So what I'm trying to show here is that if you do have two tabs, you want to look at a specific item. I'm doing a poor job explaining this. Basically, what I'm talking about is like a scope type thing. So this outer one is the org scope. This inner one is going to be the scope of the record you're looking at, but you can quickly break out of that for org scope just by searching for other things. Don't know that I did the best job explaining that, but we need to keep moving along. So we've looked at some things in the shortcuts tab. What I now want to look at is this users tab. And this users tab I find very powerful. So what you can do is you can actually search for users up here using username, email, alias, or name, and then you get a bunch of information. So when I first load this, I'm going to see the information about the user I'm logged in as. So I can click, I'd like to really show off this name link because this takes you to the access summary for the user. So we can see all of my user details. We can see my user permissions, object permissions, field permissions, all of this. This is, I believe, something that's relatively newer to Salesforce. I could be wrong on that, but I love the fact that this takes you here. Other ones, take you directly to the ID. Let's click on that. And this is going to load the all data window. And this is a super powerful window, but we're not going to talk about it yet. But just kind of remember this view because you're going to love this. Next things that I'll mention, profile, it's going to take you directly to the profile for the user. You all know what a profile screen looks like, so I'm not going to click on that. This language thing, the first one is your language. So language is US. Second one is going to be your locale. Let's click into this details one because I want to show you this. So this is going to take you to the page where you can edit all of the settings on the user. Now, granted, that last window we were on, you could do that as well. But this also has all of your links to permission set assignments and whatnot. You've all seen this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here. pset and psetg are exactly what they sound like. This is going to take you to permission sets. This is going to take you to permission set groups. But this is only so cool looking at your own user because I know everything about myself. Maybe I want to know something about other users. So I have a sales manager named Anna Apples, and she asked me to build a flow for her. So they're having a Halloween party at the end of the month, and she wants to be able to invite all of the contacts from an account to that Halloween party just by clicking invite on the account. So I built that for her. She's going to test it, and then I'm going to look at her logs. And she's actually busy, so she's going to have me test it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Enable Logs. And so I've enabled logs for the Anna Apples user. So now I'm going to do Login As. Now there are two options here. There's Login As Normal and Incognito. This Incognito, when it works awesome. But I do have some issues with that working for me, so I'm just going to do a Login As. So now I'm quickly logged in as Anna Apples. I didn't need to go to her user record and setup or anything like that, but I do need to go to the front end of Salesforce. So one moment here, sales, and I want to look for a specific account. Smith Brothers Roofing. You're going to see the Smiths come up a lot through this. So what I want to do, so this account's owned by Bob Bananas, we can see. I want to invite these people all to the Halloween party. So I'm going to click Invite Halloween Party and just click Save. Now, we're not really going to see anything happen on the front end, but let's go look at some of the contacts. So Mark Smith, we're going to stop in quite a bit. Mark Smith, now we can see that he is invited to the Halloween party. So Anna's like, this is awesome. This works great. So let me log out as her. Now I need to log back in as myself. Give me one moment. All right, so what I want to do is I now actually want to go to debug logs. So I'm just going to go in my shortcuts. I'm going to go to debug, and cool, I've got debug logs. And what do we have in here? All right, so we can actually see that debug is running on Anna. It's actually going to be running for another 14 minutes because I was pretty quick here. But let's actually go look at this debug log for, I'm going to guess because this has the biggest log size, this is where she went to the account record. So cool, we've got a whole bunch of information here. So we can actually see that that flow ran right here. Now I do want to, this is maybe not going to be all that easy to see, but we're seeing a validation rule run over and over. And we're actually going to see it run about like 6 to 7 times. And what that is we're actually seeing a validation rule run on all of the accounts that were, or the contacts that were touched when that account updated them through the flow. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on debugging. There are some great videos on it, but this is how you would be able to debug while logged in as a user. I just think this is so absolutely cool. I hope that you get some use out of this. Give me just one moment before we move along. I just want to make sure that I'm at the right spot. All right, I am at the right spot. So let's talk about this objects tab. So this objects tab is incredibly powerful. The first thing I want to point out is this search bar. Click on that, and this is going to show you all of the records that you were just at. Now, obviously, we don't see Smith Brothers. Oh, we do see Smith Brothers Roofing. That's because I was looking at it before I did this call. But we can see, but the reason that we would not see Smith Brothers Roofing as the last one, or Mark Smith, is because I was logged in as Anna. But here we can see pretty much every record that I've looked at. I haven't counted how far it goes back, but this is really helpful just having this all in your history. The other thing I'd like to mention here is not only do we see the record, we see what type of record it is, and we see the record ID. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with record ID prefixes, but let's spend just a little bit of time on that. So we can see that my user ID, or my user record, that starts with 005. Account starts with 001. Lead starts with 00Q. Okay, that's cool. What's 006? Well, 006 is opportunities. Well, that's awesome. Now, whenever I see a record that starts with 006, I know that that is an opportunity. Well, let's go the other way. Now, maybe I know the name of an object, but I don't know the record prefix. So I'm going to type in Apex class, and here I can see that that prefix for Apex class is 01P. So I just find that to be incredibly helpful. Now, keeping on with looking at contacts, let me pull up the contact object. So what's going to happen then is this is actually going to load the contact object for you. So this is how you can look at just the contact object. We're not going to look at a record. We're going to specifically look at the object. So if I click on this, it's just going to take me to the details page in setup for contact. And then going from that, if you click on fields, it would take you to the fields page in setup. Record types would take you to record types. We're going to talk about object list in a second, but I actually want to talk about this doc one. So doc is actually, when we click on this, and this I believe only works for standard objects, it's going to take you to the developer documentation for that object. Now, if you want to know an object in and out, go to the developer documentation, read through it, you will understand that object so much better. So I just definitely want to draw your attention to that. The other thing I want to draw your attention to before I start moving back up is this new button. So if I click new contact, this is just going to launch the modal window for creating a new contact. Now this works across most items, so it works across lead, opportunity. Certain ones that it won't work on are like record type. I think Apex class does work in there, but I just want to mention that you might see new for an object that you've looked up, click on it and get an authorized access there. And that's just because there is not a window for creating a new object that way. Moving on from that, let's talk about this object list. So if you click on that, this is actually going to take you to the default list for that user for your object. So I clicked on list, it took me, object list. It took me to recently viewed for contacts. That's awesome. Let's take a look at one of my contacts. So I'm going to go into Penn Bryson's contact. Now let me actually go back to my Salesforce Inspector pop-out. Now we can see that this object page has more information on it. So we've still got name, links, label, blah, blah, blah. But we have this ID in here. This is for the ID for Penn's record. So if you go up here, you can see the same thing. And then also we can see both the date it was created and by whom, their ID, and the date it was last edited and by whom, their ID. So both of these were created and edited by me because I'm the only person in here. And if I click on name, this is going to take me directly to this record. Now, how useful is that when you're already on the record? Not terribly useful, but let me show you something that is kind of useful about that. So let me paste a different ID in here. All right, so now I've pasted that ID. I'm going to click on it. Even though I'm on the Penn Bryson record, now I actually have Mark Smith's record loaded for me. So let's, before moving on from that, let me go to Mark Smith's record, and I want to show you some other cool things in Salesforce Inspector before we kind of get to the back end. Well, that will make more sense in a second. So this show field API, a field's API name. I absolutely love this because, in an ideal world, your label names are always going to match your API names. But is that actually the case? Usually not. So click on this. Now we see phone label and phone API are the same. But as we scroll down, we see that the label is ready for karaoke, but the API name is likes to sing. Like, that's not exactly intuitive. Same with favorite treat. The thing is, the API name is actually candy preference. So once again, not terribly intuitive. But another thing I want to point out is you can actually, when we're in the show API names mode, you'll see when you go over the highlights, it changes your cursor and puts a plus signal or symbol. Click on that and it actually saves that API name to your clipboard. Now, why is that convenient, you ask? Let's actually now get to the really fun stuff. So what I'm going to do is click on Show All Data. Now, this view is so powerful. I love this view because this is every bit about the record without having to worry about page layout. So anything I need to see on the record is here, and I don't have to worry about it being on the page. Now, a few things I want to call out here. Give me just one moment, make sure I'm at the right spot. Let's see. First thing I want to call out is formulas. So you can tell that it is a formula because it is in italics. And what happens when I hold my mouse over the formula is I can actually see the formula. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it because I got big screens. I'm kind of zoomed out. But I can actually see what the formula is on that field without having to go into setup. And then also I can see the output of the formula here. Another place where that's super cool is on pick list. So if I hold my mouse over pick list, I can actually see not only the API name and the help text, but I can see the values of that pick list. So no longer do I have to go back to setup and be like, oh, okay, what are the values? Like, this is the active values that are showing, if you see on that third line. Let's see, moving on from that. Okay. Let's talk about these carets at the side of the fields. Actually, I'd like to just talk about this a little bit more. So if you're noticing in type, this is actually telling you all the information that you need to know about the field. So account name is a string of 255. Assistant name is a string of 240. Email, that's going to be an email, a type of email of 80 characters. Has a treat. This is a checkbox and it is required. So just want to mention all of those things. Let's talk about these carets. Actually, one thing I want to talk about. So this was in options. These I talked about table borders. Let me turn off hide table borders. Now we just don't have the lines here. I love having those lines. It just makes it easier for me to find the information. So that's what that was about. You can also set that in options. Let's talk about these carets down at the end. So I'm going to click on these and I get more information. So field setup lightning and field setup classic are exactly what they sound like. If you want to go to the setup for the field in either lightning or classic, click on that. Otherwise, if you want more metadata about the field, click on this. Now, here is all of the data that you could ever want on this field. And you can actually add this to the list view, but it very, very quickly overwhelms the list view. So I would say if you do need more data, just go to that caret and click on the all field metadata. This is probably going to be a little bit more for designers and admin or developers, but if you need it, the information is here. Let's move our way up. So next thing I want to talk about is editing in this record. So there's actually two ways that I can edit, and I'll show you the way I like, and then I will show you the other way. So I can edit just by clicking on fields and changing them. So I'm gonna, let's say Mark's favorite candy is jelly beans. I'm just gonna change it to jelly beans. Now you'll notice that I didn't actually type it in. What I did is I was actually just, because this is a pick list, I can click up and down and just choose between my pick list values. So I love that, so I don't have to try and type something incorrectly, because it turns out I cannot type marshmallow properly. So now I could save that, or let's say that I was like, I've made a mistake. Black licorice is obviously the best candy. Let me change back to that. So I'll hold my mouse over this little icon here, and it immediately sets it back to what its original value had been before I started editing. So I'm just going to click cancel so we don't make any changes. Now, so we talked about editing by clicking on, so I just want to show you that a little bit more. So let's change some other fields. So Mark's birth date is actually off. He was born on the 18th. Let's see, we're going to change his clean status. We'll just change that to different. Actually, no, we're going to change it to acknowledged, and we're going to change it from operations to revenue operations. Okay? So the reason I'm showing you this is we can see the three fields that I've changed. They are highlighted, are not highlighted, but there is a box around them. None of the other fields have a box around them. So this way I know that I've only changed these three fields. So I'm going to click save. Now I'm going to show you the other way to edit. You can click edit and you will see all of the fields that are editable. Now I love that because then you know what the fields that are editable are on a record, but at the same time, if I change a few, so we'll change black licorice to, one second here. Oh, I'm having a problem. All right, we'll go with Nougat, and then we'll change it his name to Marcus. So here's the problem. As I look back over the record, say that I get a call from Jen, and we talk for a few seconds, and all of a sudden I haven't clicked save. Oh man, what did I change here? So that's where I'm just going to click cancel, but that's where I very much like just seeing the fields that you are editing, just seeing those highlighted when you click singly. So I hope that makes sense. I don't know that I did the best job explaining it, but we're going to keep moving along. Let's talk about this clone option. So this is incredibly helpful for testing purposes. So let's say that I want to create another Smith brother. So let's see, we're going to leave all the stuff the same. He was born on the same date as Mark. He's got the same, he's in operations, but this guy's name is, let's see, I've used a lot of names. Ralph. Okay, so we've got Ralph Smith. So Ralph at Smith Brothers Roofing. We got to update the name for Ralph. And is there anything else I want to change in here? Well, everything else is looking good to me. So, oh, we got to change Ralph's number as well. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to click Save New. And now this has actually taken me, it's created a record that is almost the exact same as Mark's, but now it has taken me to that record, to Ralph Smith's record. It actually turns out there is something I wanted to show on the last page. So let me go back to Mark Smith. I'm realizing I skipped a decent bit of stuff. So one thing I do want to talk about here is fields and relations. So right now, on the top, I have all of my fields, and as I scroll down, here is all of my relations. Now, I never used to look at this relations section. I was like, what is this down here for? It's incredibly powerful. So first thing I want to do is talk about fields. So when I talked about being able to add fields to or columns to this object list, this is where you could do it. Like I said, it very quickly fills out the list. So I usually just leave these four, but it would be the same thing for relations. You can also, get rid of that. You could add more relationship columns if you need them. I usually just leave them as is. But one thing I want to mention, when I click on these links up here, I actually get filters. So now let's say that I want to filter in the fields for all fields that have the word name in it. So now I've gotten 2, 4, 6 records back, and now I only want the fields that have the word Smith in it. So now I've gotten 2 records or 2 fields out of the however many fields were originally on there. So that just makes it very quick to find information in Salesforce Inspector in this view. There is also, give me just one moment, there is also a filter tab up here, but this one you can just get a little tighter with your criteria. One last thing I want to talk about in relations. So each of these is a relation off of that record. I'm looking specifically at cases, and this is going to make a little bit more sense in a few seconds, but let's click on all of the information here. So I want to click on this export related records. So this is going to take me to my data export query. And so now what this is doing is looking for ID, case number, subject, and so on, where the case is from contact ID. So I'm going to run export. And here I can actually see 3 cases that are associated with Mark Smith. If you need to export, if you need to do SOQL queries on related items, This is incredibly powerful, but unfortunately I don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but I did just want to bring your attention to that. Let's get back to Mark Smith on the back end. So we're almost through this. So we talked about export. Let's talk about more. So this actually shows you the metadata, not for the record, but for the object itself. Now, one thing, this view is a little bit wonky. So when you first click that, you're going to be like, well, that's great. I have all of these attributes, but the values are over. You actually have to drag your bar over to see the values. So I just want to mention that. But once again, this is also filterable. So let's see, I want to see all values that are true. So I just searched in true, and now I can see all values that are true. So a lot you can do with that. Just want to mention it. Moving along. The last items I want to talk about here are view record in Salesforce. So if I were to click on that, let's just open that link in a new tab. That is actually going to take me to the page layout view for that record for the user I'm logged in as. So I'm logged in as an admin user, and I know that this is actually my admin view because Sales has all of this information up at the top. But just in case you need to get to the page layout view, that's how you do it. Speaking of page layout, edit page layout is going to take you to the edit page for the page layout that is assigned to the user you're logged in as. So I'm logged in as an admin, and I have admin layout assigned to that user. So but let's say I wanted to change the sales to sales. All I need to do is the drop down in my page layout. But you all know page layout, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here. Then these last two, Object Setup Lightning and Object Setup Classic, are exactly what they sound like. They'll take you to the Lightning setup for the object or the Classic. And then finally, this button here is your eject button. When things are getting too weird, when things are getting too intense back here, just click this and you are now on the front page of Salesforce and everything is good again. So let's see, we've talked about that. What I want to talk about now, give me just one moment here. I want to talk about my two favorite fields, or my two favorite items in Salesforce Inspector. So what we're going to look at is data export. So this is basically SOQL queries. So give me just a moment to get up to speed in my my notes. SOQL, if you take anything from this presentation, I want you to take the power of SOQL. Like, it's so fast. I don't actually end up building reports for my user or for myself anymore. Like, I do build reports for users, and I do build reports for things that I need to reference on a regular basis. But otherwise, I just query stuff in SOQL. The other thing is you don't need custom report types. So I really feel like this is an admin superpower. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. So two ways to get to this SOQL query. So the first thing is I can either click on data export, and it's going to take me to what I had as my last SOQL query. Otherwise, I can actually go from a user ID. So give me just one moment here. All right, from any ID. One moment, drop Mark in there. All right. So now I'm on Mark's, I've got Mark's ID loaded. I'm going to click data export, and this is going to give me a real simple export. And let me just fix this so it looks a little nicer. All right. So what this is asking for is I want to get the field ID from the object contact where the ID is this, this ID number. So let me run that export. And cool, it returns something. That's awesome. Well, I'd like a little bit more information than that. So maybe I want to get like email. Actually, no, I'm going to want name first. So name and email. Now, as you'll note, as I'm typing, you'll see these selections down here become less and less. So we got email, and then let's add phone number. So what these selections down here are, let me just back out a little bit. These are all of the fields that are available on the object that you can query. Now, it's not just the fields, but if you look here, like you see where account dot, and it has this special like plus icon next to it, this is actually a lookup to another object. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but I just want to call that out. So first, let me do select ID, email, and phone from contact where ID equals that string. Well, cool. This is Mark Smith's record. So we've got email, name is Mark Smith, email is Mark Smith, or Mark at Smith Brothers Roofing, and so on. So cool. So we've been able to just, we can get one record, but maybe we want all of my records. Maybe I want to see this information for all my contacts. So let me get rid of that filter that I had there, the where ID, and we're just going to now run this. All right, well, cool. Now I've gotten all of my contacts, their name, email, and phone number, and we can actually see that I've gotten 317 records. we can see that it took 442.8 milliseconds. And you can't really see it right now, but there's a stop button here. And that's going to become important later. So just note that that is there. So this is great and all, but maybe I don't want the users where I don't have their phone number. So maybe I want to filter this a little bit more. So give me just one moment to get the query I want. So what I'm going to do is where phone is not empty. So I'm going to basically do this exact same query, but I'm going to add where phone and then is not. So there are two ways to do is not. There is exclamation or does not equal. There's exclamation equal. Otherwise, there's this one. I love the way that that one looks, but I find this easier to read. Let's see where phone equals, and I'm going to put null. You could also put single quotes with nothing in between them. I'm going to use null in this case. I'm sure some people are going to be able to tell me why we should use single quotes, but let's just do a run export. And now what we'll notice is we went from 318 records down to 259 records. So we actually cut out 59 records. And if I scroll through, I can see that all of the records that are showing, they all have phone numbers with them. Now they might not all have emails, but we're querying for where phone number isn't blank. So let's see. Next thing I want to talk about, let's say that we wanted to search in a range. So we didn't actually want to look at all 300 and some records. We just want to look at maybe 10 records. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add that range here. So what I'm going to do, I have 10 IDs in here. I'm adding on to this where query. So I've got where phone is blank and ID in, and then I have 10 IDs. They're in open parentheses. And then each ID is in single quotes and separated by a comma. And then at the end, I have closed parentheses. So now I'm going to do this on those 10 IDs. And we can see that 7 IDs are returned. So from the 10 IDs that I passed, 7 of them had a phone number. So that's how you'd be able to look in a selection. Let's keep this train rolling. Maybe I want to do something like a contains query. This is actually something that people complain about SOQL that it does not have contains, and that is a valid concern, but there is something very much like contains. So what we're going to do is an name like. So this like is what's going to be like the contains. And then I'm going to look for wildcard, MIT wildcard. And the reason that I have the wildcard at the start is maybe we have some hyphenated names in here. Maybe we have Jones-Smith, or we have Smith-Riley. That's why I want to make sure to have the wildcards here. So let me do a run export on this. And we're getting a decent bit of information back. We're getting a bunch of Smiths. We got Carl Smith, George Smith, Josiah Smith. But then we also have some stuff like Amity Branson and Mittens McGee. So, and I see that there's not anything hyphenated in here. So, oh, cool, no worries. I can just get rid of that first wildcard and then put an S because I'm looking for Smiths. Now let me run this again, and nothing comes back. And we could spend some time trying to figure out why that is. But what's going on here is I am actually querying on the name field. Now let me run this again. That name field is the first and last name put together. So all the Smiths are actually in the middle of it. So if I start without a wildcard at the start, it's not going to pick up any Smiths. Now I could actually fix that by changing this to last name. So I'm only looking in the last name field. One moment here. And not lame, last name. All right, and let me update that now. And now, so this is going to look, I've got the first 4 letters set for the last name, and now it's only going to return Smiths to me. Really, I just want to point out how that is very useful. I don't know that this is a perfect example for it, but that is a lot of people don't love SOQL because they don't have contains. That is how you can do something similar to contains, but a little bit more fiddly. Now, let's actually talk about ordering things. So let's say that I want to get this same query, but I want to order by name, okay? So I want the names in alphabetical order. So I'm going to click Run Export. And why did I do that wrong? Order by name. Oh, because I'm not looking on, okay. Let me fix up my query again. All right, let's run this again. All right. So we can see when I ordered by name that I'm getting all of my names. Now remember, we're sorting by name, which is first and last name together. So it's sorting by alphabetically by first letter. But we can see that it goes from A down to, well, we're going to pretend Z is down at the bottom. So what we know from that, when we order by and we don't specify an order, it's going to return ascending order. Now, I just want to show you a little thing that I use to remember ascending, descending. Ascending is going to go from A to C. So when we query for ascending, we're typing in ASC. So we're going from A to C. When we query and we want something in a descending order, we want to go from D to C. So a latter letter to an earlier letter. So the query is DESC. I don't know if that's going to be useful for anybody else, but that has solved it. So I don't need to run a query and then run it again the other way because it didn't come in the order that I wanted. So let me just run this now. So we got order by name descending, and now we can see that we're starting at the end and we're working our way to the beginning. And just to belabor this point a little bit, you can see I'm in the D's, and as I drag down, I'm going into the C's. So descending is from older to newer, descending is from later to earlier. And that is going to come in. Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but another thing I want to talk about is this deleted records function. So I don't have a lot of deleted context, but I do know that I have some deleted leads. So what I'm going to do is do a query for select ID name and is deleted from lead where is deleted is true. Now, when I run this export, I'm not expecting anything to come back because is deleted is a flag that wouldn't be checked on a record that's not deleted. So let me run this export. And as we see, nothing comes back, just as we expected. Now, let me click on Add Deleted Records and run that query again. And all of a sudden, I'm pulling back 132 records, lead records, where the is deleted flag is true. So I just want to mention that if you do need to query for deleted records, you can. Now, one thing, I'm not exactly sure what the timeline is for them being held. I believe it's like the 2-week recycle bin thing. So the moment that you figure out a record's deleted, start querying for it because it's not going to stick around forever. Let's see, a few other things I want to talk about here. So we have templates. So I talked about that in options where you could add more templates, but honestly, I don't really use these. And we actually went through most of the examples here. So we did select ID from, we did select ID from where we took a look at the range or the 10 different records, where we used the names and the wildcards, and where order by. So this actually, we just went through what each of these is a template of a query for. Now there's 2 other ones in here. I'm not sure what this one is, and this one's a SOSL query, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But moving on, the other thing that I love about this is this query history. Now I think this holds about 50 queries, but I can actually go back and be like, oh man, I really like this query. Let's click on this and play with it a little bit more. Okay, cool. So I've got that. I now have that loaded. Well, let's say I love this query so much that I just want it around all the time. So then I can actually save the query. So I can either give it a label or I can just click Save Query. And now let me clear this out of here. And let's say that I want to go back to that query. All I have to do is click this drop down on Saved Queries, and I have that saved query again. So I really, really love being able to have all of those queries at my fingertips. Next thing I want to talk about is relationships. So let's actually go back to my saved query. One moment here. So right now we're just querying on the contact record, or we're just looking at the contact record. So we're getting ID, name, email, and phone from contact. Let me get rid of this like. Well, maybe I want to get, actually, no, I do want to leave that. Maybe I want to get a little bit more information. Maybe I want to see the account owner, right? So I could do account. And if I click here, I would just get the account ID for the account. So that's actually on the record. So let me just show you that. So cool, I can see the account ID, but maybe I actually, and I misspoke before, I want the account name. So let me do account, then dot, and now I'm actually in that account lookup. So now in here, I have all of the fields that are in that account lookup, or that are available on the account. So I'm going to do account name, right? Let me run that. So now I can see that my account name is Tenoodle, Smith Brothers Roofing, and so on. Well, cool. I want some more information than that. Maybe I want the account owner.name. So I'm going to do account.owner. Now I could do owner ID, but that's just going to give me the ID. I actually want the name, so let's actually traverse to the user object. So I want account to, I'm doing a poor job of explaining this, but account to owner to name. Let me run that. Awesome. Now I can see that the account is named Tenoodle and the owner is Bob Bananas. Well, maybe I want to see who Bob's manager is. So let's do account dot owner dot name dot, sorry, not a comma, but a dot. And no, I want manager dot name. And I want to type manager, right? Okay, let me run that export. Awesome. So we can see that these accounts are owned by Bob Bananas, and Bob Bananas' manager is named Anna Apples. Now, I just want to throw one more query on here because we're going to save it for later. We're going to use it later. So I'm going to do created by dot name. And so this is going to look for who created all of these contacts because I'm not specifying a different object. I'm just doing created by and name. So let me run that. And we can see down, well, I guess I am kind of specifying a different object because created by is the user object. But we can see that I am the creator for all of these records. So this is maybe not the perfect example. Maybe like I use this a little bit more. We use CPQ at work a lot. So to go from opportunities to products and whatnot, or maybe the other way around, I'm doing a poor job explaining that. But I really love this feature. But let's talk even more. Let me save this query because I'm going to come back to it. Save. All right. Let's talk about the shape of records. And that's not going to make a lot of sense, but sometimes I like to the shape of records is a good way to put it. Sometimes I like to just pull in the most recent records from an object to just see what they look like and just get an idea of how often they're being created and whatnot. So let's do that from the context. So what I'm going to do is select fields and then all in parentheses. Now this is a query that is going to work on any object, but there are some limitations. Now I'm going to set from and contact. So I'm doing this from the contact record, and I want records in reverse chronological order. So I want the newest ones first. So I'm going to do created or order by, and then created date, and then what we talked about before, ascending versus descending. I want descending. Now I'm going to click run, and I got an error. So what I see here is malformed queries. SOQL fields function must have a limit of at most 200. So what that's telling me is I need to actually limit the amount of records that I'm querying for. So I'm going to do limit 200 and click run export. And now I get those the last 200 contact records created in reverse chronological order. So now give me one moment here. Let me show you a little bit about this. So let me make this smaller. The reason I like to do this is because this allows me to just kind of scroll around and see what fields are always getting filled in, what fields are never getting filled in, and then seeing where I've got some spots like, well, okay, this got filled in here. Okay, this is a relatively normal field. I feel all right about that. But just it gives me an idea of the general shape of what records should look like. Now, another thing I want to draw your attention to is this created date field. So we ordered by created date. The other thing I like to do is see how long it took to make those 200 records. So if I scroll to the bottom, I can see that the last created date showing is 10/19. So between 10/22 and 10/19, we created 200 records. So records are made relatively quick here. You might have other objects where it makes 200 records in an hour. You might have other objects where 200 records aren't made. It takes like 3 years to make 200 records. So just want to note that. So sometimes you might want to make your query if it takes 3 years to make 200 records, maybe you just want to look at a little bit more recent. So then I'm going to limit my query to maybe 20. Now, here is a trick that I just learned. Say I need to look at more than 200 records, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this limit function. And I'm going to get rid of everything in the select field or the select part of the query. So now I just have select and the next thing's from. Now this is Salesforce Inspector only. I'm going to hit Control and space. And that just filled in every field that is available on the object. But I don't have that limit here. So let me run. So essentially this is like the fields all, but you're just specifying all the fields. Now let me run this export again. Now 317 records were returned. So now I'm able to get all of my records, all of the fields on it, but here is where that stop button comes in handy. Because I'm in a dev org, I have 317 contacts. In your production org, you could have over 100,000 contacts. So you're going to start that query, and then all of a sudden this number is going to build, this number is going to build, and you're going to realize this is going to take forever. All you need to do in that case is just click stop. And it's going to take a few seconds, but it will stop that query for you. And then you can maybe tighten up your criteria a little bit there. Let's see, moving on from that. All right, let's see. Okay, We're going to talk about exporting records out of Salesforce Inspector. So, no, actually, we're going to talk we're going to talk about one thing before that. So you can actually filter among these records. So say that I just want to find records named that have Smith somewhere in there. No problem. I just filtered for Smith, and now it's looking among all of these fields for any Smith. Let me do the same thing for, do I have any users that like black licorice right now? Looks like I don't have anybody set to black licorice. Wait, do I? Oh yeah, I do. All right, so now I'm looking for just the users that like black licorice. And I don't know why it's not all 317 because black licorice is obviously the best candy, but we can see that it's 43 out of 317 records. And I can verify that that actually found that field. I know that it's at the end of it. So here we can see candy preference. All of these are black licorice. So what I want to do from this, so let's talk about exporting out of Salesforce Inspector. So as much as I love doing all of this stuff in Salesforce Inspector, sometimes you need to get this into Excel or need it somewhere else. So these three options up here are going to copy to your clipboard. So let me click Copy Excel, and then let me show Excel. Let me pull this over. I'm going to click in the first cell in Excel and then click Paste. And now it pasted all of my data in Excel format. And it's just beautiful. I can do exactly what I want with it. I can share it with others or not. Other thing I can do is copy CSV. So now I've got that copied to my clipboard. Let me bring that into your notepad. And here it is in CSV format. So let's undo that. And then last one is copying in JSON. So I've got that copied to my clipboard. Let me drop that back into my notepad. And here we can see that here is all the exact data that you had seen before, but now it is in JSON format. And the last thing I want to mention there is this item or this icon right here will just download it as a CSV. I usually have Excel open all the time, so I just usually use Copy Excel, but I do want to mention that if you just want to download it, like it's perfect as is and you just want to share it. Now let me go back to my saved queries because I want to show something interesting to you here. So this is the one where I got account owner name, account owner manager. So now we can see these object columns, and they're kind of visually distracting. Like I'm used to them, but you can click hide object columns to get rid of them. So let me run export. And now, awesome. I don't have to look at those object columns. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is great if you're just keeping the data in Salesforce Inspector. But I want you to pay attention to this Mittens McGee line because Mittens doesn't have an account or account owner, but they do have created by name at the end. So let me copy this to Excel and one moment here. Let me clear all of this out of Excel. Okay, I'm going to paste this in. So Mittens McGee is line 9. So you're probably already noticing what's wrong with line 9. If we look here, Brad Dins is an account name, not in created by name. Now we know Mittens doesn't have an account, and Mittens certainly doesn't have an account named Brad Dins. So what's going on there? Let me delete this out of here. Let me run this query again. I actually don't even have to run the query. I just need to take off hide object columns. It's going to put my object columns back. Now let me copy this and put it in Excel again. And let's drop that guy down here. Okay, one moment, please. All right, now Brad Dins is in the right place. The reason being is these object columns, otherwise Excel seems to move data over. So if you're going to be moving stuff into Excel, do keep those object columns. Then all you have to do is just highlight them in Excel, and then you can either, give me a second here. You can either just delete them or hide them. So I'm just going to delete them. And now I essentially have the data in the same form that it would have come if I had turned off the hide object columns. I just want to mention that as a caveat because it will drive you mad if you're not sure what's doing it. A few other things I want to mention before we get out of data export and into data import. You can query the tooling API. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but let me just do a query for users. So select and then from users. Okay, and now I'm going to use my handy dandy little control space to, control space to fill in all my fields. Now let me just do a run export. And we can see that I have all kinds of fields on the user record, and I've pulled all of my users in. So these are the normal data fields. Let's try this again. Give me one moment here. But now I'm going to query from the tooling API. So we can see all these fields I'm getting rid of. I'm going to click delete. Now I'm going to choose tooling API. Now let me hit to choose all of my fields again. So I'm hitting control and space. Now I only got a few fields. Well, that's interesting. So let me run that. So, and different information was returned. Like workspace ID was definitely one that I don't think was in user or in the normal user data. So let me turn off tooling API and query again for this query and run it. And we can see that workspace ID is not a field on the entity users. Well, it is, but it is a tooling API field. So, you know, this might be useful to you if you need to access the tooling API. I just want to mention that there. Two other things that we're going to do, and then we're out of export section. You can actually export, so you can get your event log file. So if any of you, if you don't have Salesforce Shield with the event log monitoring, then you get 1 day worth of event log data, and you've got to use that ELF browser to get to it. And it doesn't always work all that great. So you can actually query that event log from here. So what I'm going to do is I've got this query set up, and then I'm going to hit control space to fill in all my fields. Now let me run export. And so this is supposed to get me all of my event logs from the latest one first. Now you'll notice all of my event logs, the created date is 9/30. I think that this is a dev org thing, and that's why I'm not getting yesterday's event logs. But in production, this does work properly. So I did just want to mention that. All right, so last thing I want to talk about, the exports, is you can now do SOSL queries in Salesforce Inspector in here. So SOSL is structured object search language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to query for the word Smith in all name fields, and I'm going to return the name field on the lead, the name field on the contact, and the name field on the account. So I'm not just querying one object, I'm querying in multiple objects and all fields in them that are name fields. So let me click run export. And cool, we've got 16 records returned to us. And we see a lot of Smiths in here, which is what I've been looking for. But we also see like Donna Marie Lantoff, Kane Jeps. What's that about? So let's look in Kane Jeps' record. I'm going to click on that. And then I've got various options. And you've also got this in all data. I could click show all data. Query record would just bring up a new data inspector or a Salesforce inspector to query that record. View in Salesforce just shows you the page layout view, and copy ID would just copy that to your clipboard. But let's go into Kane Jeps. Let's look for all data. And then I want to find how Kane Jeps relates to Smith. Well, Kane works for a company called Behan Cole & Smith. So what I just want to show is how powerful that was. We looked among multiple objects. We looked for the word Smith, and we weren't even looking in like first name or last name fields. We were looking among multiple fields. Now, I don't have a lot more to say about that, but SOSL seems to be pretty useful, so don't forget this part. Now, let's talk about data imports, and I promise we are almost done. I realize this takes a long time, but we're almost through it. So, data imports. So you have the ability to import data in Salesforce Inspector. So let's do just that. So you can actually import 3 types of data. I'm only going to do enterprise, but you could also do tooling and metadata. There are multiple actions you can do: insert, update, upsert, delete, and undelete. I'm actually going to do insert and delete today, but all of these are incredibly useful. Format, you specify if you're giving it to an Excel, CSV, or JSON format. And then here, remember when we talked way back at the start about options, and we talked about batch size and threads? Well, here's where you can set that on a per job basis. So let's talk about this for a few seconds. So batch size is the amount of records you're sending at one time. So right now, I'd be sending a batch of 200. Threads is the amount of batches you're sending. So if I'm sending 6 batches, I could be sending up to 1,200 records to my org at one time. Now, like, you know, for real simple stuff like leads, that might not be a problem, but maybe you have an object that has a lot of automations, a lot of validations on, maybe like opportunity or something like that. Here is where you might want to actually throttle that down, and maybe you want to do like 1 thread and a batch size of 50. So you do you, but I did just want to mention that. So we're going to do 2 data imports. We're going to do a good data import and a bad data import. So let me show you this good data import. This is the type of data import that you only get when you provide it for yourself. Like all the fields are filled out. If the person has an account, it's got their account ID ready. All of my API names are in there. It's just beautiful. I love looking at this. So let me copy this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this paste Excel data, click paste, and now I have it all in here. And my field mapping is beautiful because I had those API names right. So as I scroll through, I see everything looks good. Awesome. I see 995 are queued, and it actually should only be 95, but when I built this in Makaru, I left it as 1,000, and then I tested with 5. But going on, let's click Run Insert, and so we can see that it is going through in batches of 200. And fingers crossed, all of them processed, everything was successful, and we can see what happened. So now let's do a bad data load. So this data came from Bob Bananas. We talked about Bob a little bit more. And Bob is a great salesperson, but maybe Bob sometimes cuts some corners. Looking at this data, I'm already seeing some issues. I'm seeing a lot of last name is unknown, business is unknown. And what happened here is Bob knows that if last name or business is not filled out on a lead record, that it will not load. So basically what he did is he just put in dummy data. I don't love that, but it is what it is. Next thing, let's talk about his API names. Well, we don't have an F name in Salesforce. We don't have an L name. Contact info, that looks like it's email. Biz, I'm going to guess that is company name. Telephone, that's actually named phone in Salesforce. Source is lead source. Job title is title. Rating is actually correct. Home base, what the heck is that, Bob? Well, it actually looks to be countries. My notes, that looks to be descriptions. This field, Bob rating. So Bob has his own internal classification system that is only in his head. We don't have a field for it. We're not going to upload this to Salesforce, but Bob left it on his sheet. I could delete it at the Excel level. Otherwise, I can just get rid of it in the import. But the one thing Bob did do right is he did give me the API for owner ID, and he did give me his user ID because Bob wants to be credited for these leads. So good job, Bob. Let me copy all of that. Let's do another load. So I'm going to paste this into Excel, and the eagle-eyed among you are already going to see an issue. But field mapping, we can see none of my fields work. Well, that's weird because I know that rating is correct. Well, what it is I'm still actually on the contact object. So just want to mention that to you. So let me switch over to lead. And now when we look, lead rating looks good. So now I know I'm on the right one. So now what I need to do is go and fix my other mappings. So let's see, first name, that's going to be, I'm just going to type first, and it's there. Let me get rid of this one, and then I'm just going to do the drop down, and we can see last name right up at the top. So now I'm just going to go through and quickly fix this. Email, company, okay, telephone is phone, source is, since the word source is in, there's nothing else. I can just choose lead source from that, change title, job title over to title, and home base is going to be country. My notes is going to be description. And then Bob rating, we're just going to click skip because we don't want that. So now what I'm going to do, I've checked all my field mappings. They all look great. It looks good down here. Let me do a run insert and click insert, and 100 successfully inserted. So I could scroll down to the end and see that they were successfully inserted. Now, one trick I want to mention here, you can actually, if you have some errors, you could copy this into Excel. You can fix those errors. You can paste that exact data back in here, and it will only, and then click retry failed, and it is only going to update the ones where it did not have a success message. So I just find that amazing. I just figured that out the other day. So cool. So let's see. Now, I just want to make sure that all of my contacts and leads did come in. So let's see. Let me just look for all contacts created in the last day. So I'm going to look, select ID, name, created date from contact where created date equals last day. And we can see that 999 records were created. And I actually created 4 records before this, so that looks good. Let's do the same for lead. One moment here. And we can see that I just exported 100 records. It all happened on 10/22. Now, I got an email from Anna, Bob's manager, and she's like, I was looking at Bob's leads, and I see that there's a lot of ugly data in there, and we need to clean this up. Now, granted, we probably shouldn't have let that bad data get in the first place, but now that it's in there, let's get rid of it. So let me paste, that's not the query I'm looking for, one moment. I promise we are almost done here. All right, so I'm pasting in this query. I'm looking for ID, first name, last name, company, phone, email, country, and created date from lead, where phone and email are empty, or company and last name are both unknown. So we can see that I've got ands and ors in here. I've separated them out. Let me do a run export here. And Cool. We got a decent bit of stuff back. We got Alan, unknown with no phone and no email. We got Marn, unknown. And we got an email address, but long story short, these are not great leads. So I got about 26 of them I want to get rid of. Well, check this out. We left the delete record button available to us in the options. So I'm going to click delete records. That's going to take us right back to data import. It's already loaded the delete action. It's already loaded the object we want to delete on, and we only need the ID field map because that's all you need for the delete. So we've got 26 queued. Let me click run delete. And those guys are all gone. So we have imported data, we've exported data, we've imported data, we've deleted. We are actually at the end of what is in version 1.24. But real quickly, I do want to talk about what's coming in version 1.25, but I don't have time for demos for it. So there are two really big, cool things coming, and they've already got pages for them on the how-to. The event monitor page, so this is not like the event log file browser. This is actually for Salesforce platform events. So you can subscribe to and display platform events, and you can actually replay them. So I know some people are starting to use platform events for launching automations, and there are some issues, it's a bit ephemeral. So this way you can actually go back and look at those. The other thing I want to mention is this bulk field creator. So this is awesome. You can actually instead of having to go into the object and create a new field, you can set the object here, and you can either create one at a time and set your options or permissions, or you can upload from a CSV. Now I've tested this, it works pretty cool, and there is work going forward on it, but I just want to show that without taking like another 10 minutes to demo all of that. So with all that being said, I am done with my demo and ready for questions.